most pastors I know, it's probably safe to say basically every pastor, at least in the modern West, is very familiar with criticism. And that's not just pastors alone. I know that's true for a lot of people. Criticism is hard, it's painful, and it continues to be hard and it continues to be painful. But one of the things I've learned, not because I'm smart, but just because I've been pastoring for 20 plus years, it's basically when you say yes to that calling, it's saying yes to pain in
Mhm.
many ways, because as a pastor, I think it is a part of pastoral responsibility is to be a container for the hurt and the pain and the confusion when the attachment is unhealthy, and by God's grace to reattach, to re-engage in a healthy way, that whatever criticism comes my way, even if it feels or sounds personal, it's not. I represent to this person a particular hope or a particular heartbreak, and I need to journey with them, in that
Mm.
sort of long unfolding journey. And I've learned to see that as a gift. It doesn't make criticism any easier.
You're listening to Sincere Practice.
I started reading Listen, Listen, Speak, and I've tabbed most of your book. You can't see it because it's like focused, but like there's a section in there about how you had to go to counseling,
Yeah,
and like there's so much loneliness immigrating from South Korea.
yeah.
But I wanted to like start out by asking what your reflection process has been like, because there's so many instances where I'm reading something and I'm like, oh, he's really taken the time to
Oh,
reflect on it. Like, maybe we can go concrete. There's a
yeah,
section in Analog Church where there's a woman who gives you a bad review at the
yeah,
church. And then she goes like, it's too much of like a rock concert.
yeah.
And I can imagine that must have been really hard to read as a pastor. Like, what was your process in just realizing that she was right and like the humility to hear her?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. Yeah, I still remember that review. It was a long time ago,
Yeah.
but pastoring, I'm not alone. Most pastors I know, it's probably safe to say basically every pastor, at least in the modern West, is very familiar with criticism. And that's not just pastors alone. I know that's true for a lot of people. But it's unique when you're pastoring, because anybody who is engaging in any sort of religious tradition, for the most part, they're doing so because it is in some form or fashion either the sort of bedrock or foundation for all of life for them, or they are desperate enough to be seeking some sort of transcendent reality. So for
Mm.
most people engaging in any particular religious experience, it's not sort of a peripheral, casual thing. It is out of desperation or deep hope or hunger or whatever. So when someone is frustrated enough to publicly voice in some form or fashion some form of critique, it's, it's a big deal to them typically.
Mm.
So for me, just being a human being, we're humans before we're anything else. Criticism is hard, it's painful, and it continues to be hard and it continues to be painful. But one of the things I've learned, not because I'm smart, but just because I've been pastoring for 20 plus years, one of the things I've learned over that time is that, you know, the vocational call to pastor and shepherd people includes it's basically, when you say yes to that calling, it's saying yes to pain in
Mm.
many ways, because as a pastor, I think it is a part of pastoral responsibility is to be a container for the hurt and the pain and the confusion of others. Pastoring is not primarily standing on a stage and preaching a sermon and then having everybody applaud, like, what a great sermon, like that's
Mm.
the stuff that you see on social media, but that's not really the primary call of pastoring. Certainly preaching is a part of pastoring sometimes, but pastoring in its essence, I think, is being a container for the pain and the confusion and complexity of life for others, and then bearing witness to the grounded, settled, anchored reality that is the love of God, which is all around us. So, that sort of that perspective has helped me detach and then reattach in a healthy way to people when they are critical.
Mm.
My default mechanism when criticism comes my way, like most people, is fight or flight. I want to either fight it and just argue back, or I just want to flee. I just want to flee the scene. Like, I'm out of here. I don't need this. And I've learned over time that the call to pastoral ministry is a call to detach when the attachment is unhealthy, and by God's grace to reattach, to re-engage in a healthy way. That whatever criticism comes my way, even if it feels or sounds personal, it's not. I represent to this person a particular hope or a particular heartbreak, and I need to journey with them, in that
Mm.
sort of long unfolding journey. And I've learned to see that as a gift. It doesn't make criticism any easier. It still hurts,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's grounded me, that perspective.
Yeah. I love what you said about attach and reattach. Because even as a therapist, like there is a rupture and a repair in client relationships that I continuously struggle with. I hate letting people
Yeah.
down. And the attachment to work. There's a quote that I actually wanted to read and unpack with you from Listen, Listen, Speak. You said, "A listening life sounds serene and effortless. In reality, it's anything but. Hearing God requires willful effort, not because God wants to make it hard on us, but because God desires our attention. And attention demands that we relinquish all other pursuits. So we listen as an act of will, focusing our minds and hearts. We do this in a variety of ways. And then three essential practices are paramount. You talk about prayer, scripture, and church. And I feel like so much of your writing is the application of faith, but like the listening life is so hard in our culture,
Yeah.
you know? How do you come back to God and just like a spiritual rhythm of life? Because there's so much happening in the world right now, politically, economically, socially.
Yeah. For me, I don't know if this is true universally, but it's been true of my experience. This wasn't always the case, and I still don't think I'm like a great listener, but
Me too.
I value it a ton because of the journey I've been on, and I did not start out this way. I think when I first began to pastor in a local church context, I was in my early 20s and I was ambitious and I thought I knew more than I actually did. I think that's a sign of maturity, is not knowing more, but coming to a deeper awareness of how little we know,
Mm.
and increased curiosity and hunger to learn, I think, is a sign of maturity, one of the signs of maturity. And so it's not because I am a mature person, it's because I'm in my mid 40s and I've failed so much over 20 plus years of pastoring that I've learned, by God's grace, I've learned really critically important lessons through my failures. And one of the things I've learned is that anything transformative that happens in a person's life happens in spite of me, not because of me. So anytime I try to take control of a particular situation, whether it's like a pastoral counseling type of relationship, or it's preaching a sermon or leading the church sort of organizationally, or whatever it might be, it is only when I get to the end of myself and open myself up in humility, with hunger, for God by His Spirit to speak, that I've seen real life change unfold, and it becomes pretty obvious in those moments, man, this is it has almost nothing to do with me, and it really is just a grace and a gift that I get to have this sort of front row seat. And when you read the biblical stories beginning front cover to back cover, what becomes pretty clear is that God really, really enjoys doing his best work through the people you would least expect. And I think that's intentional. It's
It's good.
because God wants to make so clear that he's the one that is writing the story. Any good, beautiful, true story is written by God. So because of that, I've learned to really embrace and over time actually quite enjoy in a genuine way, really enjoy the listening life. Listening for God, first and foremost, yes, through scriptures, his words already spoken, in prayer and ongoing union with God in conversation, and through the people of God, the community of faith, the church. And there's a real freedom and liberation in that. That's what I've discovered is when I relinquished the self-imposed pressure to have all the answers, when I began to feel comfortable enough in my own skin as a leader to be able to publicly say, that's a wonderful question. I don't know. I'm not
Mm,
sure. And then to just leave space. When I became more and more comfortable with silence, as awkward as it might be,
yeah.
that's when I began to see God by his spirit really do the stuff that I could never do. And I've seen it enough where at this point in my life, I embrace it, I enjoy it, and I look forward to it. And yeah, it's just there's such freedom in knowing that I don't have to have all the answers. I don't need to always have a response. My job, first and foremost, is to shepherd souls to places that are quiet enough where they themselves can listen for and hear the voice of God. And if I can do that, then I'm doing my job. And that alone has in many ways made the thought of pastoring for many more years to come
Yeah.
sustainable sustainable reality for me. Because if it was contingent upon me having all the answers, I would have found myself at the end of myself a long, long time ago, and then just
Yeah.
called it quits. Well, like that's it. I don't really have anything else to say.
Mhm.
So I'm so grateful that, that's not really what pastoring is. Pastoring is helping people listen. And that I can do. So,
Mm. I love that. I never heard anyone say that before. Pastoring is helping someone listen. Because usually when I hear pastors talking about their calling, it's usually about them. But I love the perspective of almost surrendering whatever preconception you have.
yeah.
But I also know that how you're speaking right now is indicative of what you've been through. Like my husband is actually reading Analog Christian,
Mm,
and there's a section in there about how you and Jenny went through infertility
yeah.
and how you make a there's a line in there that he was actually saying he was like, "Oh, you're interviewing Jay Kim today?" He's like, "I love Analog Christian."
It's
But he
kind.
was yeah, my husband was saying there's a line where you said, "I thought that it would just happen, like in 9 months it would go through." And
Yeah.
then we were talking about how you and Jenny dated for a while and because she was in graduate school, you had to wait.
hmm
There's
hmm
so much in your life, I feel like the theme is waiting and feeling behind, especially as, like, a South Korean immigrant. I relate
Yeah.
to that a lot, like, I'm the oldest in a Filipino family, and so much of my life, I felt like I had to be more, do more, have
Mm,
more, know more. And,
yeah.
like, how did you I guess, what lessons have you learned from those moments of waiting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lesson I'm still learning. I think it's a lesson I'll learn in perpetuity. One of the things that in this season of my life actually most recently. I wrote Analog Christian a number of years ago. It came out in 2022, but books, you're writing it, it's like a 2-year process. So I started writing it during COVID, during the pandemic, 2020. So the sort of initial genesis of those thoughts and ideas was like over half a decade ago. And I share that only to say it's a long, slow, steady process. I'm still learning it. And
Mm,
one of the things I'm learning, is being attentive to the present moment. And a large part of why that is a struggle for me is because you're right. You put your finger on the pulse of my life in many ways. I'm in my mid 40s. I have spent the better part of 40 plus years feeling behind. And the reality is I still feel behind,
yeah, me too.
I still feel like, man, I should be further along in this way and in that way and in every way. And what I'm realizing is that is, man, it's like highway robbery. It robs me of the gift that is the present moment. And that, I have a dear friend who told me years ago, and it's always stuck with me. God exists outside of time,
Mm,
but the incarnation means that God is with us in time, and he can only be with us in this time. God is not behind you. He is not ahead of you. Yes, he is omnipresent. He is everywhere at all times. But in terms
yeah.
of the intimacy and the personal connection, God meets you exactly where you are in every single moment. And so when you leave this moment, mentally, emotionally, and otherwise, you are leaving God. Um, that's always stuck with me. So it's something I'm still working on, and it comes down for me because of my personality and otherwise, it comes down to just very practical sort of ritual practices I have in my life every morning and throughout the day and every evening, particular prayer practices and centering practices that just remind me to live right here, right now, because this is where God is, right here, right now. And
Mm,
that's not generally my disposition.
me
And so
too.
it's a lesson I'm still learning,
Yeah.
and I'm grateful, for the lesson.
Yeah. I'm prone to anxiety to look forward into the future. What are some of the daily practices that you do in the morning?
Yeah, there's several, but the ones that I'll share that are most sort of relevant maybe to this conversation. I drop off my kids. I have 2 young children now, and I do morning drop off at school every morning. And one of my rituals is the moment they leave the car, I pray the Lord's Prayer very slowly over my wife and my children. So, our Father in heaven, your
Mm,
kingdom come, your will be done in Jenny's life today, and Harper's life, and Simon's life.
mm.
More of your kingdom, more of your will. I'll pray specific situations and circumstances that they're going through, that I'm going through. I pray that same prayer over our church and over my teammates here on staff. And then give us today our daily bread. And then I'll just pray specific needs, And so
Wow.
it's a long, extended, probably 15, 20-minute sort of prayer through the Lord's Prayer as I drive into the office. So I do that every morning, and it helps ground me in the presence of a God who is listening. And then it helps me to listen back. So
Mm,
I pray the Lord's Prayer slowly over my family and friends and our church and myself every morning. And then throughout the day, I practice breath prayers, for
what's
I'm
breath
sure.
prayer?
So a breath prayer is it's an ancient Christian tradition. It's literally prayer as breathing. So you would inhale a particular thought and you would exhale a particular thought. So it happens in a particular moment, but the embodied practice of breathing the prayer reminds you that the Spirit of God, ruach in the Hebrew, pneuma
Mm,
in the Greek, those words, spirit, the Holy Spirit, they literally mean breath or wind. And so for followers of Jesus, when you breathe, and if you can take the time to just sort of center your breathing on the presence of God, it is a reminder, an embodied reminder that God is not an ethereal idea floating out there somewhere. He is present and active in you, with you
Wow.
and in you, that he is the animating, energizing force in your life. And so the traditional sort of classic, or they say original breath prayer was a simple one. You would inhale the prayer, Lord Jesus Christ, and then you exhale, have mercy on me, a sinner. So you just
Mm.
inhale, Lord Jesus Christ, have mercy on me, a sinner. And
Wow.
but the beauty of breath prayers is that it's malleable and it's agile. So one of the breath prayers that I've been practicing for several years now, I pray it multiple times a day because it just takes a moment. It's just breathing. I will
Yeah.
regularly pray multiple times a day on most days. God, you control outcomes. Help me be faithful.
Mm.
So I inhale, you control outcomes. Help me to be faithful. And it's just so comforting.
That sounds so
And
comforting when you talk about it.
yeah,
Yeah.
such a beautiful, it helps me. For me, I practice that particular breath prayer because in my role at the church and
Yeah.
just my role as a husband and as a dad, I am prone to, feeling like you, anxiety because of the sort of undue self-imposed pressure that I've
Yes.
got to create a particular narrative or a particular reality. And it just reminds me like, man, I have way less control than I think I do. Control is a
Yes.
myth. I just got to be faithful. That's all God's asking of me is for me to just put my best effort into whatever small thing he's called me to today. And if I can do that, then all is well. God's in control. God controls outcomes. I don't control outcomes. I just have to be faithful. So I pray that multiple times a day. And then at the end of the day, I pray, this comes from the Ignatian spiritual tradition. I pray through the movements of what is commonly called the examen or the prayer of examen or the daily examen. And it's just kind of a 5 movement prayer, typically prayed at the end of the day, where you take a moment. Movement 1 is to just grow in awareness of God's loving present right there with you. It's just, God, you are here. You're here with us now. And then to pray a prayer of gratitude. And it's always specific, like one thing that happened today that I'm so grateful for. Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it was a conversation. Maybe it's something that went well, whatever it might be. I'm just so grateful. It might be as simple as, man, like it's raining right now where I am, which is pretty rare this part of the year, but I love the rain. So it's like, Lord, I'm just so grateful for the rain, and so it's you pray a prayer of gratitude, and then you pray a prayer of reflection where you reflect on one painful moment from the day. Again,
Mm.
maybe a tense conversation or relational break, or you got into a fender bender, or you have a stomach ache, whatever it might be. Just you reflect on something painful from the day and you just hold it before the Lord. Like, God, this was hard, or this is hard, but you're here with me in the pain.
Mm.
And then the next movement is confession. You pray again, very specific, not just a general, like, God, forgive me for all my sins, but you think back on your day and consider one way in which you lived misaligned to the way of Jesus.
Mm.
And you just confess it to the Lord and you receive the forgiveness of Christ. And then finally, the final movement is to look forward to the day ahead. One
Mm.
specific thing that is coming the next day, and you surrender it to God. God, your will be done. Would you guide me? Would you lead me? Would you speak through me? So I pray that every night. I pray it actually, Jenny and I pray it with our children. We do kind of like a simple little kids
Yeah.
version of it with them. And then I will pray it quietly before I go to bed. And so those are some prayer practices that shape my day. It sounds like a lot, but really it's not, it's just kind of
Yeah.
a normal ritualistic pattern in my day. And it's,
Mm.
yeah, those practices have been life-changing and life-saving really for me.
Yeah, I love how you frame it, that it's ritualistic, and so it just gets weaved into your day naturally as part of your
Yeah.
daily practice.
Yeah.
Speaking of Simon, your son, I did wanna ask how that relationship is going, 'cause I know you wrote Listen, Listen, Speak a couple of years ago, but there's a section in there about how you were like, "I'm more prone to anger with him because he's more
Yeah.
like me."
Yeah.
I wanna be a mom one day, and so as a dad, like, how have you learned to just, like, be present with them?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm learning very slowly. Uh, I'm still prone to losing my patience with him much more quickly, actually, than I do with my daughter
Mhm.
or my wife. I'm more prone to losing my patience quickly with him than any other person in the world.
Really?
Yeah, and what's so
Wow.
strange is I love him more than any other person in the world, other than, my wife and my daughter. I would give my life for them. And it's moving slowly, but it has, yeah, I'm so grateful I have seen these small steps. Some of it, I think is just life stage as he's getting older.
How
We're
old is he
finding
now?
he's 7, he's almost 8. When I wrote Listen, Listen, Speak, it came out in 2024. I started writing it in 2022. So he was little. He was like 4 or 5 during that season,
It's amazing how you
four
can
to
just
6.
see personality that quickly, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And as he's gotten older, he's become increasingly fun and enjoyable for me, and we have many more shared interests. We throw the baseball around in the backyard and we shoot hoops. We were shooting hoops yesterday in the
That's
backyard. It's
awesome.
just so there are these moments like that just naturally make it a bit easier to connect. But I'm still prone to losing my patience with him. But the gift has been I recognize it much more quickly. I recognize there's a little bit more self-awareness. So I recognize what's happening. And essentially it's like, man, this is not him. This is me. This is like unworked family of origin stuff. It's unworked, still needs to be dealt with, sort of internal attachment issues I probably have, because of my upbringing and whatever else.
Yeah,
So it's slowly getting better. So I'm really grateful for the trajectory that we're on.
yeah.
And also by God's grace, in spite of me, he's just turning out to be the sweetest, little boy. So
It's amazing, and it's great that the 2 of you have those shared interests because you get to have those moments together
yeah,
compounded over time. But
yeah.
if you're open to it, I know that you talk openly about this in your books, and I know some of your sermons mention this too, but, like, in your process with, like, unworked family stuff, what are you still working through?
Yeah, I didn't know my father. He passed away 12 years ago, 13 years ago now.
Mm,
So I didn't know my dad. I grew up I have no siblings, so I grew up in a very quiet, lonely childhood.
yeah.
My mom, we immigrated to the US when I was like 4 or 5 and from Korea. So, it was kind of a classic immigrant story. My mom had to work 2, sometimes 3 jobs at a time just to put food on the table. It sounds hyperbolic or something, but that was true. I mean, that
It's
was
your
our
reality.
actual story, and that's the actual story of a lot of people,
Yeah,
still to this day.
true.
Um, and that's a whole other conversation, about compassion toward the foreigner and the alien. But all that to say, uh, I think a lot of what I'm working through now, without getting into all of the messy details, is, my mother, who is this passionate, devoted follower of Jesus. She always has been, at least for my entire childhood. She became a Christian when I was 2. She was an agnostic, and then she had this sort of overnight radical conversion experience, became a deeply on fire, sort of committed,
Gives me
passionate follower of
chills.
Jesus. And she still is that to this day. And so in many ways, she's my hero. But I think a lot of what I'm working through now in therapy and otherwise, I was with my counselor yesterday, and it's always a gift. He's a wonderful man who God has used and continues to use to bring so much healing into my life. But yeah, a lot of what I'm processing with my therapist and through spiritual direction is disentangling myself from a particular narrative that I had inherited and that I built over time about who my father was, about who my mother is, and it's never black and white. Not that like my mom's, something that not that she's someone that, that she isn't, but rather that there's complexity and trauma and pain in her life
Mhm.
too, and a lot of that was passed on to me in a variety of ways. Not because
Yeah.
she's a bad person, she's a lovely person, but
Yeah.
because she's a hurting person, and hurt people hurt people. And and then my father too, just I had built this narrative. I had inherited and built a narrative for most of my life that he was just a bad guy and that he abandoned our family and let us down and he was a loser and I needed to just get away from him and wanted nothing to do with him. That was just the story, that I had written. And I think in the last several years, in particular, the last 3 years, God, by his spirit, is sort of rewriting some of that narrative for me. So
Wow.
I'm still on the journey, and I think I'll be on this journey for the rest of my life, but I'm grateful to be on the journey. I find a lot of hope in those small moments when I come to some realizations about my father that leads me toward greater compassion and empathy. And so, yeah, still on the journey.
Yeah. That's so profound, just like the slow work of forgiveness and reworking and reframing. I'm reading a book right now by Dr. David Powelson. Side note, I'm taking like a graduate level course on biblical counseling. And there's a section in the book about how sanctification and change happens slowly over time. We only
Yeah.
need to go towards the direction of it. And there's
Yeah.
a visual metaphor where he's like, if you're going in the direction of the beach, even if you're scraping through it with nail by nail, like you're still in the direction of the beach,
Mm,
And I think about my own family story when you were talking about that. I didn't know English when I came to the US
mm,
and I was put in an ESL class similar to yourself.
yeah.
And it was really it was really hard having a relationship with my parents. Like both my parents are still married, but there was a time where my catalytic converter got stolen, and Tagalog language is so blunt. My mom was like, "Do this, do this, do this, do this," and I took it almost the wrong way. And I think one of the ways that I guess sin has manifested in me is I always think I'm right, and it comes out in an avoidant attachment where I just won't speak my opinion and I'll just do what is right. And in
Hmm.
counseling, I've learned that openness and letting someone into that process is the most healing thing I can do.
Wow.
So in that conversation, when I was feeling offended, I told my mom, in moments like that, when you tell me that um, I should have done this instead of this, it makes me feel like you don't trust me. And I had never shared that with her before. We had always fought. Her response to me was, "Oh my gosh, I thought I was being helpful. I'm sorry. That'll never happen again." But it's moments like that where I'm like, "Oh, I think I need people." You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can't do that on my own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That takes a lot of courage. I mean,
Yeah.
the child parent relationship is so unique and it's just fraught with such complexity.
Yeah.
I just think it's such a powerful thing to hear your parent say, I'm sorry.
The first time that it ever happened, that was like,
Yeah.
yeah, I still think about that moment.
Wow. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah. Has
It's
that ever
beautiful.
happened to you?
Yeah, it has. Yeah. My mother, she's not done it often.
Yeah.
It's been sort of a source of frustration. I think my mother has a lot of pride, but I've come to realize she also has a lot of pain. So to say I'm sorry is to get to the depths of the reality of a thing. It's like you only find genuine remorse and confession and repentance at the very bottom layer of a particular thing,
Yeah.
it's all covered with, reasons and excuses and situational circumstantial sort of realities. Well, because of this or because of that. And
Mm.
so it's hard. I have a lot of, yeah, I have a lot of compassion, for the struggle, anyone who struggles to seek genuine forgiveness. It's hard for me too, because it requires the very painful work of deep, honest reflection and excavation.
Mm.
And my mom has a lot of trauma from her childhood,
Yeah.
significant trauma. She lost both her parents by the time she was 12. She was the youngest of four. Her two oldest siblings, her two oldest brothers, they both passed away by the time she was in her early 20s. I mean, just significant trauma.
Wow.
So in my adulthood, as I've learned a bit more about how that sort of, you know, yeah, how our own stories shape us and frame us. I think often of that
Mm.
line from Peter Scazzaro in Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, where he says, Jesus lives in our hearts, but grandpa lives in our bones, and
That's a
it's
good line.
true. It's
Yeah.
true, So that's given me a ton of compassion and empathy toward her. And it's relieved me of the incessant need to have her apologize for all the ways in which I feel like she wronged me, as a
Mm.
child. And it gives me a lot of compassion now becoming a father. It's like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I'm in the same exact boat, It's like not if my kids will need therapy, it's like how much therapy. I'm just trying to minimize the amount of therapy they're going to need.
Yeah.
So, but one of the things I have learned, I will say I do genuinely apologize to my kids much more regularly and often
Mm.
than my mother did. It's not because I'm a better person than my mom. I'm not. She's a much better human being than I am. But it's just because I have had the great benefit of growing up in a culture and in a season of human history where wonderful people have done a lot of work along these lines. And so I've learned one
Yeah.
of the greatest gifts I can give to my children is a gift I never really received growing up, which is to own my mistakes as a parent and to let my children know, man, that was wrong. Talking to you that way was wrong, or I should not have lost my patience that way. I am sorry and I love
Mm.
you. And that was a failure on my part, not because I don't love you, but because I'm still growing too, and
Mm.
I'm really sorry. Please forgive me. So I'm grateful that at least that is not unfamiliar to my children.
That's
I am
beautiful.
hopeful that at minimum my kids will grow up into adulthood and be able to say, no, mom and dad, they did apologize. They did own their mistakes. And
Mm.
they did reaffirm to us over and over again that they loved us and that they were for us. They didn't let that sort of anger or disappointment linger.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Because I think the byproduct or consequence of that, is that they will never idolize adults. Like, there will
Mm,
be an understanding that grown-ups make mistakes too.
mm-hmm,
I think one
mm-hmm.
of the things that I thought was that age defined wisdom.
Yeah,
And when my parents would mess up, I did want an apology. I did, but to be, not given one, I was like, "I guess I'm wrong."
yeah,
And there was
right.
just a lot of just having to sift that out, but I just love that framing of, like, I'm still growing too,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I hope, I don't know that it will for sure, but I hope it liberates them as they grow
Yeah.
into adulthood from that pressure, like what we talked about at the beginning, or to be further along. I hope it alleviates that they grow up with the understanding all of life is a journey. You
Mhm.
never really arrive. And if you make arriving, becoming that person you think you're supposed to be, the sort of telos of your life, the end goal of your life, you will live perpetually frustrated and anxious. So instead, the goal is to, again, in the present moment, experience the love and the grace of God in spite of your shortcomings, and to find in that experience and acceptance, and a sort of belonging that maybe many of us sort of grew up thinking we had to like achieve it or earn it or something.
Mm.
And so I'm hopeful that my kids will have a different experience. I don't know that they will, but I'm hopeful. Yeah.
I think it's a hopeful message that you are actively present in your sin and you're actively working to make it better. I think it would be my thinking is that sometimes the greatest disservice that we can have with family members is not giving them the opportunity to see how we're developing and how we're growing,
Yeah.
you know? I
Yeah.
think that's a huge testament. But I did want to ask you this. It's like as you begin to work through your next book, because I know it's coming out in a couple months,
Yeah.
you said something that I was curious about. You said the process of writing a book takes about 2 years,
Hmm.
right? What inspired you to start writing? And what's that been like now that it's like 4 books that you've now written, right?
This will be my fourth book. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fourth sort of solo book. I've contributed to some other books. Yeah, it's a great question. I think I've always I've always loved reading,
Yeah.
since I was a kid. Once I learned how to read, once I learned English and then learned how to read, I started really loving reading. And then pretty early on, I think sort of in my teenage years, I found a lot of comfort in writing. And of course, as a teenager, I wasn't thinking like, I'm going to write some book. It was more like I would write stories. I played music for a while. So I loved the craft of writing lyrics to songs. I was in some stunningly mediocre local bands but I so thoroughly enjoyed it in large part because I got to write lyrics and tell stories that way. So I've always loved the process of it. And then once I got into my 20s and began, teaching and preaching regularly, I think in my insecurity, as my insecurity and my desire to achieve and succeed started to blend with my actual deep love for the written word, that sort of mishmash created a desire, I would say early on, an unhealthy desire in me to write a book, and so I remember in my 20s, I was a student ministries pastor. I remember taking like a month off of work and staying at a friend's back house, in Southern California for like a month trying to write a book. And I distinctly remember that experience because I went down there and my goal was to write a book,
Mm,
but I had no idea what the book was going to be about, and so I spent a lot of my 20s kind of in that season.
yeah.
And then once I got into my 30s, I realized I don't I don't think the desire to write a book is a good motivation to write a book.
Yeah.
If I don't really have anything meaningful to say, then why would I say anything, And so it's interesting. It's actually when I relinquished that sort of self-centered desire to be an author, that's when I started, for through a variety of circumstances and situations, that's when the doors started opening to writing something. And it was born out of not my selfish desire to write a book, but actually my first book, Analog Church. That book got written not because I wanted to write a book. It got written because I started thinking about and teaching and preaching on how important sort of embodied community was,
Mm,
particularly in an increasingly digital, detached age.
yeah.
And I just started teaching about it a lot. I started thinking about it a lot. I started talking to people about it a lot. And then people started saying, like, man, these are helpful thoughts. You should
Yeah.
write them down. And
Yeah.
that's what got me going. So it was an interesting journey. It was when I relinquished the desire to write a book and instead started putting that energy toward, I just want to have helpful conversations that matter because there are unique challenges we face in the digital age. That's when the whole process got going.
Mm,
So that's been really helpful. Now, I don't write because I want to write lots of books. I
Mm,
only write if I sense that, God has done something in my life that has been helpful to me. And I sense that I want to offer that as a gift to others if it could be helpful to some. So
mm.
I'm so grateful that I went on that journey. Yeah.
Yeah. Your next book is actually on grace, right?
It's on pace. So it's
Pace. Okay.
on living at a particular pace. It's actually framed around what I talked about earlier, the Ignatian prayer of examine, but not the prayer itself. Like, here's how to pray the examine at the end of every day, but those 5 movements as a way to think about all of life so that we might live at the pace of peace. That's the title of the book, The Pace of Peace. So
Mm,
it's really a book about distraction and attention, and
mm,
how an examined life helps
mm,
us live at a sort of pace, at a speed that feels most human.
mm.
And that's just born of some of the stuff I shared earlier about my own
Yeah.
life and my own practices and such. So, yeah.
Yeah. Jay, I want to be mindful of time and just say thank you. Um, and for a lot of things, I feel like I know you even before you came into this podcast interview. But I think that it's really refreshing to hear a pastor's immigration story, a pastor's therapeutic experience, a pastor's fatherhood life. I think I really admire how open and vocal you are about your examined life. And a lot of the questions you've been asking yourself are questions that I've asked myself as a Christian, as a believer, as someone who is just trying to live life well.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. It was a joy.